Hello, everyone. My name is Alain Dandurand. I'd like to talk about poverty-stricken areas. So, if we're going to end poverty worldwide, we'd have to act together as federations all around the world. There's about 118 countries, so that's 118 federations. Ideally, what would be best is to have a global government supporting 118 countries, but we're not quite there yet, right? So I'm talking about poverty stricken areas, and maybe the best course for us to take to end poverty worldwide. So if we don't have a global government that's supporting all the countries or securitizing all the countries or helping out all the countries, then we need an organization. So it would be a worldwide organization or an international organization that helps the poor. How that works is people that have a lot of money would donate to this organization, or they would donate to global government because they have the means to donate. They have enough money to donate 50,000 or 2.3 billion or whatever. If they have even more money, they could donate 5 billion, right? If they're very, very wealthy. So it's some kind of organization where there is staff helping out every country, every federation, and you got governments working together. You got municipal. When you talk about government, there's three types of government. There's municipal, which is the city. There's provincial, which is a sector of the country. And then there's federal, which is the whole country. And federal has its own organization, its own government. It's called a federation, right? So anyone around the world, let's say the worldwide population is roughly around 12 billion people, then anyone with a lot of money can donate to this organization or to this global government, right? And when you talk about reconstruction poverty, you're reconstructing areas that don't have enough homes for people to live in, right? So when you're talking about not only putting an end to poverty worldwide, you call it reconstruction poverty. So what happens with these areas is that you would have to build schools and residential buildings and underground pipelines and sewers and parks and highways and roads, things like that. And when you have that all set up, then you could move people into the buildings, right? And if they don't have enough money to live in a building, then you would provide the home for free, putting them on a step-to-step program where they could regain their life in every way, right? So maybe there's missing institutions like some kind of a government bureau or an institution of education or resources. So you talk about all the different types of resources that could help poor people all around the world. The main objective with poor people around the world that don't hardly have any money is to stick them inside a home so they have somewhere to sleep, etc. So this requires a lot of money. So you got people that are very wealthy that could donate to a worldwide organization, or you got people with a lot of money that could donate to global government, which would go into global reserve, right? And then the other way is, I talked about there's 118 countries. So that's 118 federations. So when you talk about federal government, you're talking about Federal Reserve, how much the federal government has in the bank, in the federal bank, which is called Federal Reserve. And if they have extra money, then they could donate to this organization or they can donate to global government. which eventually would lead up to a certain amount where you could end poverty worldwide. And not only end poverty worldwide, you can reconstruct poverty. So you reconstruct areas that are very poor, that have bad homes, insects, it's filthy. The underground pipelines, sewers don't work, so you have to create new pipelines, underground pipelines and sewers, right? So it happens pretty quick with a federation, right? Because every federation has a certain amount in reserve, and they usually have billions and billions and billions in reserve, and they just have to donate that to whatever organization that is. You call it ending poverty or federal government or the name of a country. Sorry, not the name of the country, or another name for this organization, right? What's important with the poor people is that when you talk about poor people, they usually don't have enough to get by. So they usually don't have a home or enough money or enough cigarettes or enough food, right? Needless to say, they're jobless and they don't have enough cards. Like they don't have their ID card or their bank card, social insurance card, whatever it is. So the most important thing that we have to do to help poor people is to grant them more than enough money, a home, more than enough food, more than enough cigarettes, an identification card, and a bank card. So let's say with all the money donated by individuals or a federation, we're able to provide them with not only a bank card and an ID card, but we're able to put a bit of money into their accounts. So living is not as harsh. For them to live is not as difficult. They have more flexibility. And when I talk about a step-to-step program, you're talking about rehabilitation, you're talking about recovery. A lot of poor people are active drug addicts, active alcoholics. They don't have a job. So a step-to-step program is rehabilitating them and helping them enter recovery, right? So you got rehabilitation and a step-by-step program where they could not only re-enter or enter for the first time global society, maybe it's even possible that they enter the workforce which it could be that it makes a long time they haven't worked, right? Or whatever. It was difficult for them to enter the workforce in the past years. Maybe they tried, right? Okay. So you talk about rehabilitation and recovery. When you talk about recovery, you have drugs and alcohol recovery. You have codependency recovery. You got anger recovery, self-esteem recovery. You got sex addiction, sex and love addiction. So you basically have 6 forms of recovery, and a lot of poor people would probably identify with a numerous amount of not just recovery fellowship and meetings, but different types of forms of recovery in the first place, right? Let's say that the poor guy is not just the poor guy is not just a drug addict and alcoholic. He's not just an active drug addict and alcoholic. He has anger problems. He could be having difficulties in other areas, like he might need a therapist or a specialist, like a psychiatrist or a social worker or a psychologist. So then you go into rehabilitation and recovery for poor people when they have access to buildings and they have access to food and resources and a home. They have more than enough money, more than enough food, more than enough cigarettes. So you go into to recovery and rehabilitation. And what I call that is the intertwining squares, where specialists are all connected together. It's like 2 squares two squares intertwining together, right? So you have the ambulance that gets the people off the streets. You got the ID of the person in the system, in the national system, with the information about the person, and you have a homeless. You have homes for homeless people, or you have buildings set up where they could have their own home. And that's directly tied into psychologists, psychiatrists, and a social work. And obviously, if they don't have the money for that, they have quick access to the specialists that they need to recover and to rehabilitate, right? And then there's also the hospital, where not just the hospital where they were born, but the present hospital where they attend, where they are actually a patient, right? So usually everyone has their own hospital, and then they go to their own hospital. So that's called the intertwining squares. So like I said, the first thing we would need to end poverty or to reconstruct poverty is enough donations worldwide that we could cover billions of dollars to help these poor people to reconstruct these areas with like everything that they're missing. And they definitely need the resources to be where they want to be, right? But somehow you don't let them sleep on the street during winter. It's ice, it's cold, there's snow, they could die. So they always have access to a home, right? And it's the ambulance and the police. They pick them up, they bring them to their hospital, they take care of them, and they get a home. They have to enter a recovery program to get off drugs and alcohol, whatever, when you talk about the 6 forms of recovery, and they start a step-to-step program where they can regain their life, where they have the specialists to help them regain their life, right? So the first aspect that we have to cover is having enough donations from individuals and from federations all around the world, right? It's not that difficult, but you need a good organization to create it, to establish and to launch it, to implement it all around the world, right? So you got groups of people that become one organization, and they're able not just to end worldwide poverty, they're able to reconstruct poverty, to reconstruct really poor areas. Or maybe there's some areas that don't have any residential facilities, and you create more buildings in those areas. Because some countries, they have a huge landscape, but there's no residential buildings, there's no government buildings, there's no company buildings, right? So you're setting up homes there and bringing them there. And you got also the aspect of public transport, because they're poor. They just entered a home. They have more than enough. They have more than enough money for food, for cigarettes. They have more than enough money in general. Then they could begin this step-by-step program that could help them in their life and regain their life. Most people, they know the life that they want to have. They know the people that they want to be. They know the career and occupancies that they want to have, and they know the social life, dating, relationships that they want in their life. But it might take a while to get there, right? So I was talking about the first step is the donations, to have enough money from all the countries, all the individuals, to set it up and launch it, and then they have more than enough of what they need to survive or to be even comfortable. So you're talking about homeless people being comfortable, having a comfortable lifestyle, and when they be finished their rehabilitation and recovery, then they could gain more like careers and more money, and a lot of them would go back to school. They would go back, maybe finish their high school, go into college or university, and there's even schools today where they teach courses so you could obtain a certificate, like a bank teller or a manager or security guard, right? So eventually they could take the proper steps to regain their life, or to create a life where they have the career that they really want to have, right? Most people are not blind about these things, but you have to get them in a certain point of recovery and rehabilitation that they could actually see and be aware of what they really want. Because if you're dealing with people on the streets or people that are always out of money, their life is so difficult, they're so baffled that it's difficult for them to know these things, right? So you get them sober, you put them in this program of intertwining squares, you give them a home, and you start the program with them, the step-by-step program, right? So you can't leave people on the streets, like sleeping on the streets, where they're begging for money, and they're begging for drugs, and they're begging for alcohol. It's our responsibility to help those people, and there's enough people worldwide that could create this organization to help people, to help poor people, to help these people, to end poverty and to reconstruct poverty. The other thing too, it's the person doesn't have an identification card, right? So that's when, let's say the ambulance shows up with the police, they have to bring them to the hospital, and the hospital is able to acquire the information of where they were born, which hospital, what time, the city they were born, and they could eventually develop a new identification card, right? And then the second card that's important is the bank card. So this organization could put a bit of money in their bank, even though they haven't worked, because they're not at a stage. It's good to put money in their bank because they're not at a stage where they could work yet, right? They're off the streets, or they're always out of money, or they have too many problems because they don't have access to enough things. They don't have enough money in general, right? So you're talking about the identification card, right? And there's the second card that's important for them to have is the bank card. So you got this organization that starts, let's say one day before they have enough money in this organization, let's say we already have global government, which everyone would see the purpose and utility of having a global government, where all the countries come together as one to help out, to innovate, to reconstruct, to make the world a better place, et cetera, right? So you got like this organization, right? And the thing about this organization that I'm talking about is we need a lot of support, right? We need the right people. It could be a politician, a reformer, it could be a rehabilitation advisor, it could be a doctor, it could be a national leader. It could be someone that just wants to help other people, but we need enough support, right? And when we have that support, then we could and if it's familiar enough to other people, if it's popularized enough, if it's known enough, then it comes right in. The donations start coming in. There's some people, they have a lot of money, so they don't mind donating 2 million, or a federation doesn't mind donating $2 billion in this organizational reserve, right? So I'm saying that what we would need first is the support to get this organization going as quickly as possible. And when it's all set up properly, you could just launch it, right? So you got the intertwining squares. You got the ambulance, the police, the homes where they live. You got the psychiatrist, the social worker, the psychologist, the therapist, working with owners of buildings. You make it you can make a homeless shelter more comfortable, more accessible, where it's not as difficult, and if you also where the poor are in better hands, like people really take care of them. It's not like you sign them up, give them a bit of food, they have to sleep in a homeless shelter with crack dealers and drug dealers, and they're still getting drunk, right? It takes time. You have to spend time with them, you have to give them attention, a lot of attention, and you have to care for them. You have to take good care of them, because a lot of poor people don't know how to take care of themselves. So if we don't work together as a worldwide society to take care of them, we're always gonna have the same problem, not only with poverty-stricken areas, but with poor people and all, right? So there's a lot of people that they love to help other people, or people are in leading positions, or they already work for government or whatever, and they would join this organization. They would help out in this organization. One of the problems that we could encounter, let's say the police and the ambulance, they pick up a homeless person, and the homeless person is an active drug addict, active alcoholic, right? So it's like you can't, if you put money in their bank, like free money in their bank, you give them a free home, a bank card, an ID card, and free money in their bank. We have to be careful, because active drug addicts and active alcoholics, they could slip if they have too much money and they die, they overdose, right? Usually they're begging for change and stuff like that. So you can't put too much, but you put enough where it's comfortable all the time. And the thing is it's like it's obligatory by the national government that you need to follow a step-to-step program to regain your life. So it goes in the system, the national police system, or the federal government system, and people just know what to do. It doesn't have to be fascist or really strict, but you can't let them spend $2,000 a week if they're active drug addicts. There's a lot of active drug addicts that are addicted to crack. Crack is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I've seen people, they started using crack, they never stopped using crack. They've been trying to regain their life, and it's I've seen a lot. They're still using crack. They haven't recovered. So they need more assistance. They need us not just to help them a lot more, they need us to care for them and to give them more attention. And if you got the staff, the specialists, if you're trustworthy, the poor people know they can trust you. Let's say you're an untrustworthy person, the poor people are going to know that they can't trust you. They're not stupid, right? So it's important in this program to have specialists that are trustworthy, and specialists that really care about poor people and really want to help out poor people, because it's the only way it's going to work, right? So you talk about human resources, a human resource branch to hire candidates to work in this organization or this department in global government. So in 1 week they could receive, like, let's say for example they don't receive more than $500 a week, or but they're always taken care of. Like, let's say they spent all the money, the only money they were supposed to spend in one week. They always have access to more than enough food. They always have access to more than enough cigarettes. They always have access to a home, right? And there's some countries, they're so poor. There's so many areas that are poor that you have to start talking to the assembly politicians, or you have to start talking to the federal politicians to help them out, right? So it's like when you have the right contacts of another country that has a lot of poor areas, uh, you could, with the right contacts, you can move in and help these people, right? So you're working with the politicians in that country. You have close contacts, and you move in with this whole organization and all these people working for this organization, and you reconstruct poverty. You reconstruct poverty. You reconstruct poverty. And when you set up everything else, then you start ending poverty. You end it, and you end poverty completely. Eventually, worldwide, we ended poverty, you see. I'm pausing right now to see if I covered all the material that I wanted to cover today. It's easier with a global government to cover all these things, because what a global government does is that it brings all the nations together, working together. So the right uh, nation, the right politicians, right nations work together, right? And like together as 118 nations, it's so easy to resolve like all the problems worldwide, because you have so many people working for government that's helping out global government, or that's helping out everywhere around the world, right? And the other thing too, it's you could have global law, right? And when you have global law, what that is the highest prerogative. So national politicians are not allowed to do this. Like, this is a global a law, or it's a you or it's some kind of a global corporate law, where it's easier to not just end poverty or reconstruct poverty. It's so much easier when all the nations are together, working together with a global government. It's so much easier to end crime. You talk about all the cameras worldwide, you have the satellite cameras. It becomes much more difficult for criminals to do crime, right? But another example is like, let's say the national leaders don't want to reconstruct poverty or and vast amount of poverty in their country, then by global law you can move in there and resolve the problem, right? To kind of get these politicians out of the way, and you're with the right contacts, with the right contacts of that federation, you're able to resolve what's going on, to reconstruct poverty, and to end poverty in that country. It's much easier when we're all together as nations. Call it a global leader, and then you have global assembly, and the nation votes for its global assembly representative, and there you have global assembly meetings, right? So I'm talking about poverty-stricken areas and reconstructing poverty and ending poverty, right? When you have when you have a leader of a nation and him or her has their team, there's not much that those national citizens can do, because those are the ones leading the country. So when you have a global government and global law, they have to abide by global law. But you're talking about necessity. It's necessary. It's not being fascist. It's not having a dictator. It's a global leader working well with assembly members, 118 assembly members, resolving the problems around the world. So let's say a federation on average has about 116 laws and regulations. The global government would only have, by necessity, about 17 or 18 global laws, right? Because federations could choose for themselves, and global citizens can vote for the national leader, and global citizens could also vote for their global leader. Needless to say, their provincial and municipal leader. But it happens fast, right? Once it starts escalating, when people start donating in this whatever organization it is, when they start donating, it racks up fast, happens fast. You got the construction workers, right? Reconstructing the area, parks, highways, roads, buildings. You're putting institutions in those areas, like education institution, or like a government institution. It could be anything, right? So it starts when it starts happening, it happens fast. People, they understand the organization, and the organization has to be run and occupied by the right people, or it's just going to crumble. It's going to fall apart, right? So you need the right people that are solid, that understand enough, that are generative enough to develop it and launch it and implement it. A lot of people, you got psychiatrists that prescribe medication, and you got psychologists that do therapy, and social worker that does therapy as well. Um, it you know if if the psychiatrist is only talking about medication, it's not really going to help the patient. And if the psychologist is talking about knowledge, it's not going to really help the patient. And if the social worker is talking about strategies or tactics, it's not really going to help the patient. What's going to help the patient is you really care about them, you're empathetic, you're sympathetic, and you want the best for them, and you have a lot of compassion towards them, right? like I was saying, another time, if you're a politician, like a federal politician, the duty or your duty is to serve your country, right? It's not to get what you want what you have within your federation or your nation. Your duty as a politician is to serve your country, right? So you got leaders all around the world, and with this organization, it would be the same thing, right? The organization to reconstruct poverty or end poverty is composed of people that really want to help other people, that have that compassion, empathy, and it's not just it's not just dry, right? People are motivated and fueled. They love helping other people. So you got a psychologist, a psychiatrist, social worker, not really like that. So they might not help the patient as much. They might fail to help the patient. You know, a federation. You got a federal government. I call it a federation. Um, they build their own system, right? So what happens sometimes? You got criminals working for government, right? And everyone's conscious, aware enough to know and understand that there should not be criminals working for government. What happens is these leaders, like you got the national leader and his team, or national leader and her team, they develop their own system, and it becomes a crooked system where it's not just the people that work for government are criminals. The national citizens are criminals because the people that work for government are criminals. So I'm talking about a global government. When you have global government, you could have global military to securitize global citizens, to protect global citizens, to bring justice to global citizens. You got the global law, right? So it's, but when I'm talking about poverty-stricken areas where, with some federal contacts, you cannot do it. With some people, you cannot do it. But if you work with the right contacts, you could do it. And eventually, you can move into that country and reconstruct the poverty-stricken areas to end that poverty in that country, right? Some people they don't have a lot of money, like myself. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm not out of money, so it's a good thing. So someone like me, I donate $2, as insignificant as that seems. That's donating $2 or $5. So there's different classes of people. There's different status, and there's some people that have billions, and there's some people that have millions. And you're talking about Federal Reserve, which might have I don't know, 400, 500 billion, and then there's money going into this organization, whether it's an isolated organization, or we actually get to the point where it's called global government. You know what I mean? It's so you're taking care of people. You're taking care of poor people, and with the intertwining squares, you have the right people taking care of other people, right? So what I'm talking about is generativity, right? So it's almost impossible to help anyone without that type of what we call generativity, right? So if you want to help poor people, you need that generativity, you need that caring, that love, right? To help those people or it's going to be impossible to help them. It's not like someone's just doing their tasks. A lot of people, they get a job and they do tasks, and they learn how to do tasks in their company, but they're not really dealing with other people. Or it could be like part of this organization. There's people like that. They know how to do the task, but they're not compassionate enough. They're not caring enough. They're not loving enough. They don't want to help people as much. So you have to be aware of that, right? And it's important to have the right staff in the organization. So you got to, when you talk about rehabilitation for poor people, a step-by-step program, I was talking about you have Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. So when I'm saying active drug addicts, active alcoholics, the primary step is to get sober and stay sober, but they need the help to do that. But you're going into different forms of recovery where people have trouble with different things. Like the poor person might have a mental illness, right? So they need the right treatment for that mental illness. Hopefully they could remove their whole mental illness, and they're with specialists that are able to remove their whole mental illness. So it's the right treatment. What's happening with the western part of the world, if you talk about the western part of the world, I see it like Canada, Quebec, and US. It's like three countries. And in the eastern part of the world, they have Asia. I call it Squint Asia. It's like Japanese, Chinese, or Korean, like really like squint eyes Asia. I call it Squint Asia. The medicine is different, right? So in Asia or Squint Asia, they tend to use more organic biological medication. In Canada, US, and Quebec, they tend to use more chemical, right? So I'm talking about the poor person has a mental illness, but soon we could come together and able to resolve and cure mental illness altogether. But I was talking about recovery and rehabilitation for poor people, a step-to-step program where they not only recover from drugs and alcohol, they recover their mental illness with the right treatment. There's anger, codependency, self-esteem, there's sex addiction, sex and love addiction, right? So a lot of the poor people, they need to talk to someone that they trust. They need to open up about everything that happened in their life and why they're stuck where they're stuck. And we need the right people to be able to listen to them properly. We need the right people to be able to care for them properly, or it's never going to work, right? So step-by-step rehabilitation, they get a free home, a free ID card, obviously, a free bank card, money in their bank, because there's enough wealthy people and federations that are able to donate in this organization to provide them for that. It's not like as a worldwide society we don't have the means to do that. Some people, it's difficult for them to have enough money to have their own home, or it's difficult for them to get sober and stay sober. So we assist them more, and we help them more efficiently than we did in the past, right? And it's the same thing with schooling programs. If they have to go back to high school, most people, they finish their high school. If they go into college or university or certificate schools, we're able to pay for their schooling, right? Because they don't have enough money for schools. So us as a worldwide society, or as worldwide politicians, we're able to afford that. We're able to afford their school, their home, their bank card, and money in their bank. And it's also very important they have enough food, and they have more than enough food, more than enough money, more than enough cigarettes, and they always have a home to sleep in, right? And it goes in, you talk about global law, and then you talk about federal law, and you talk about provincial law, and you talk about municipal law. So some people, they have like they did mistakes because they were active drug addicts, active alcoholics, because they didn't have a home. They wanted to eat, they wanted crack, they wanted heroin, or they wanted, I don't know, marijuana, and they wanted to drink beer. So they made mistakes. So they're tied into the national judicial system. So when I talk about a step-to-step program, we would have to provide them also with a step-to-step program where they're able to regain their life by being pardoned by their government, and to stop doing crime, or to stop doing crime that they're not even responsible for in the first place. Let's say they were insane at the time, right? So right away, like, you got the poor person, and what do you have? You find the poor person. They're on the street, or they're over there, or they're living there, or whatever. What's the first step? You have the ambulance. You have the police that work with them. Well, a lot of poor people, they might have paranoia, or they're scared of the ambulance and police. So you assist them properly to the hospital. As soon as they get to the hospital, you're able to help them. So you got in the system, the hospital system, you got the federal system, the judicial system, the police system, all the information about the person. They know how to help the person. They have the means, the resources, they have the contacts to help the person, calling it the intertwining squares. It's intertwining squares where specialists are working together. It's like one big organization that has different specialists working. And another thing too, like in what happens in Quebec, it takes a long time to find housing that's not that expensive, to have more government payment, to have resources to psychiatrists, social workers, psychologists. So the reason why we have these problems in Quebec is we don't have enough money to cover it, right? So you got other federations donating to Quebec, or you got Canada donating to Indonesia, or you got Canada donating to Morocco. I'm giving examples. What would be best is one organization that reconstructs all poverty, one organization that ends poverty. It's like a huge team, and they pretty much have participants everywhere. They move into countries. They work with the right politicians, the right specialists, the right reformers. They have access. One of the problems with poor people, they don't have access to what they need, and needless to say, they don't have access to what they want. So if you're able to really provide a poor person with access to what they need, then secondly, you could also help them have access to what they want in their life, right? People are like, well, we should just be grateful and appreciative of everything. But once you resolve major problems, it's okay to want what you want, right? Like the person gets sober and stays sober, but then you're able to have the life that you want. You're able to have the occupancy, the career that you want. And there's nothing wrong with that. To say that we all deserve not only what we need, but we all deserve what we want as well, right? So you talk, I'm talking about poverty-stricken areas and a step-to-step program for these people. Just a second, I'm going to check the timing and see if I covered all the rest. These poor people that are inscripted in like the judicial system, maybe they did crimes or felonies. with the right implementation, with the right program, they could be led to a point where all their criminal records are erased because they got properly rehabilitated. Like, you can't just stick poor people in jail, right? They're just like in a cell doing nothing. You have to treat the patients. You have to treat the poor people. You have to grant them access to the right therapy, treatment, and specialists, right? So it's like if specialists don't get to the poor people, you bring the poor people to the specialists. Most poor people, they're not hesitant to do what they have to do to have a better life, to have a good life, but you need the right people to talk to them, right? You need the right organization to help them. They don't want to be forced. That's one thing I notice about a lot of poor people. They don't want to be forced to do something, or they don't want to be forced to do it your way. They kind of see things their own way, and they have their habits and they have their behavior, stuff like that, right? But one thing's for sure, that if we have this organization or a department, global government, one thing's for sure is that it'd be easier to work with politicians from every country around the world, or even if you just have one politician or two politicians per federation, per nation, it's much easier because this also grants us donations from Federal Reserve. So the money escalates so fast that if you have the right team, you talk about the specialists intertwining squares, the construction workers, you have the right team, and you're able to resolve the problem much faster. But obviously, like, even an individual that doesn't work for government could donate, I don't know, like 6.2 million, and that's a lot of money. Even that is a lot of money to put into the organizational reserve. You have to clean places too, eh? Like you got like a really poor area. That's sometimes the best thing you could do is destruct the whole building because it's too old, right? There's like rats, there's insects. The underground pipelines and sewers are all rusty. They're dirty. It's slime. You have to reconstruct. That's like, so you have to tear down the buildings. Yeah, you have to redo the underground levels, right? Like another. Before I was pausing, I was trying to remember what I was going to say. Public transport is so important for poor people because they don't have access to a vehicle right away. But what happens with public transport cards is that it's not really affordable to a lot of poor people. They don't have enough money. Like let's say a federal reserve has enough money to cover all the poor people public transport passes, it would help them out so much more because they don't have to worry about spending money on public transport, and it's public transport. But when you talk about public transport, you have the buses that run everywhere in the nation. You have the underground train that runs everywhere in the nation. Like some people, like a lot of countries, their public transport is only in like one city or five or two or three cities. Eventually, you got to get public transport working in the whole nation, right? And it's like in where I'm from in Quebec, public transport is $104 a month, and like poor people don't have enough money to spend that much on public transport, but they do need public transport. They need to get from point A to B, right? And let's you know another, I was talking about countries working with other countries. Like, let's say a federal government doesn't have that much money in their reserve. As another federation, you could donate money into their reserve. It's just being nice, doing a good deed, uh, uh, um, being generous, being kind. You know, it's like it's well, you know, as a leader, I'm gonna work with my team. And I'm gonna see if I could donate this amount of money to this federation, to this country, right? And then it happens. And in one transaction, it's done, right? And the more people that jump into it, the easier it is. Someone's on the street and they're hungry, and they tell you they're hungry, so you go buy them a burger or two burgers and you give it to them, and you say goodnight and you walk away. It's like you got small contributions, and then you have larger and larger contributions, and then like eventually there's so many people contributing worldwide, we don't have any problems in the world anymore. And if we do have problems, it's like minor difficulties because we covered it all, right? So I leave it at that. My name is Alain Daudzuran. I was talking about poverty stricken areas. I love you all. And till next time.